This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey everybody, welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I am, as always, your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records, home to bands like Amon Amarth, Killswitch Engage, Cannibal Corpse, Fates Warning, Whitechapel, and many, many more. Omen, old school Omen, good stuff. I've also written 2 books, by the way, about Metal Blade Records. If you can pick those up on Amazon or anywhere you buy your books, just put my name in and 2 books will come up. And check them out if you would like to. So on this episode, we're going to go with really one of the greatest metal songs of all time, Motorhead's Ace of Spades. What can you really say about it that everybody doesn't know? Amazing track. As always, we've got Martin Popoff, who's going to give us some great historical information on the song. Then I'm going to bring in my old friend, producer Bill Metoyer. We're going to talk about the production of the song. And then we're going to bring in my good friend, legendary comedian Jim Florentine to talk about this song. So it's going to be a fun one. So enjoy, relax, and here we go. Mr. Popoff, take it away.
Thanks, Brian. Yes. Ace of Spades. This is an absolutely iconic heavy metal song. It is rising in legend over the years all the time. You hear it at sports events. It's got that beautiful, beautiful Lemmy stun bass intro, and you've got the snare coming in, and then it's just super fast throughout. It's not very long. This is a big song from a big album. This is the Ace of Spades album, of course, issued October 1980 on Bronze Records, produced by Vic Mail. It is their 4th album. And, they're just growing in stature in England at the time. I mean, it's kind of a cult hit. It's a much bigger hit in the UK than it was in the US. But yeah, this song came out as a picture sleeve and a 12-inch with the cool red picture sleeve with the ace on it, a Dirty Love non-LP track on the B-side. But it's just a really good, heavy, iconic sort of song in terms of the lyrics as well, which sort of, lays out Lemmy's credo of living sort of thing. It's got a great bluesy, Tony Iommi type guitar solo from Fast Eddie on it, good solid drumming from Filthy Animal. The interesting thing about this song, I did a History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff podcast episode all about this idea of these albums. You see them happening all the time that are going gold based on Spotify plays. So I kind of did the math on this. And with this song, 487 million plays, and then another 60 million more across the other songs. You've got 550 million track streams, just on Spotify alone. So that works out to 366,666 albums sold. Does it have another 140,000 across all other platforms plus physical over 40 years? I think so. I think this is a gold album in America. I think it should be certified gold. But yeah, it's a lot of the heavy lifting is done by this song. Of course, I did a Motorhead book on just on the early days. I'll just read you a little excerpt from it. Inspiration for the closing sequence, particularly the reference to the dead man's hand, derives from the tale of Wild Bill Hickok holding those cards when he was shot dead. As for wider influence, Lemmy qualifies that he's more of a slot machine gambler than a card shark, but where's the drama in that? Nonetheless, his recent left forearm tattoo, the phrase born to lose, live to win, circling a spade, might also have played a role in the lyrics' birthing. As Eddie says, if you listen to the lyrics of the song, it kind of sums it up. I'm born to lose, gambling's for fools, you know what I mean? That's the way I like it, baby. All that sort of thing. I don't want to live forever. The lyrics for the song are kind of like a rock anthem in a way. It's like how I don't give a shit and I'm doing what I want to. If I lose, I lose. If I win, I win. So yeah, just 2:47 long. It's kind of the follow-up or the glossier version of Overkill from Overkill as just being one of these, as we used to call them back in the new wave of British heavy metal days, OTT songs, over the top songs. The rest of the album gives you a lot more variety, different speeds and stuff like that. But it's just a cracking opener, as they say, over in the UK, and was a massive song. And apparently it went platinum as a single in the UK for sales of over 600,000 copies. So pretty crazy, absolutely iconic song, and really the number one thing Motorhead's going to be remembered for. And I remember even talking to Lemmy all about. I'll actually read you a little bit here. So he says, this thing about being known for one song. He says, well, every band gets that. Every band is attached to one song. Lynyrd Skynyrd, Freebird, Eric Clapton, Crossroads, but he's got a few actually. Hendrix, Purple Haze, all these bands with different songs. You have to just grin and bear it. And we were lucky. We got famous for a good song. Ace of Spades is a good song. I don't mind playing Ace of Spades because it's good. But imagine if you are famous for a turkey and you have to play that for the rest of your life. So there you go. Another great addition to Brian's podcast here. An incredible, important song in heavy metal history. Ace of Spades, Motorhead.
As usual, thank you, Martin. Lots of great stuff there. I love the Lemmy quotes. The Lemmy quotes are always good. And Martin, of course, has written over 150 books about heavy metal. So if you need information on literally any heavy metal band, Martin's probably written a book on it, including several from Motorhead. So Lemmy quotes were awesome. I didn't realize either how popular that song was in the US. I mean, it's Motorhead. I know they're big, but all those numbers that Martin put in there were really interesting. I was kind of unaware that the stuff was that huge. So anyway, thanks as always to Martin. And we will.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Welcome back, my old friend, legendary producer, Mr. Bill Metoyer. Bill, how are you today?
I am hanging in there, Brian. It's kind of wild what's happening here in Los Angeles with all the fires and winds I'm as well as can be expected, man.
Yeah, it's craziness out there for sure. And thoughts go out to everybody dealing with that. And I know people who've lost their homes. And yeah, it's just awful. I was complaining earlier about being in Dallas and it being freezing cold and snowing, but that's nothing compared to what's going on over there. So
yeah, it's like a war zone over here. It's friggin' crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, born and raised here. I was walking down the street a couple of nights ago and the wind was literally blowing me into the street.
I lived in Simi Valley for a long time, and that's Simi Valley. Simi is Indian for windy. So yeah, we get crazy winds out there, but never anything like
Yeah.
like what happened there. It's just awful.
No, I don't know what's happening, but this is ridiculous. But
Yeah, it's
a little better today, I think.
good.
It's a little better.
Good. So we're going to talk about the legendary song Motorhead, Ace of Spades. One of the most legendary metal songs ever. It came out at a time when metal was struggling a bit, kind of before the whole new British heavy metal, everything reignited everything. So Motorhead was kind of one of the lone bands holding up that heavy metal flag. And this song was certainly become their pinnacle song, one of the most important songs in the history of the genre, if you ask me. But what I didn't really notice or never really thought about it until Martin Popoff in his talking about the historical part of the song, it's only 2 minutes and 47 seconds, or well, 2:48, but I guess the Canadian version is 2:47, but that's short.
That is very short. That's pretty punk, to be honest with you. Even I had never really noticed that until I listened to it again just a few days ago. And so it is to the point, straight and to the point, that's for sure.
Definitely the punk influence had a big thing to do with Motorhead, and they were kind of coming out of the whole punk movement was happening. And in England, I'm sure that seeped into them, which of course then seeped into Maiden and Metallica and Slayer and everybody else. So they were kind of the first, really one of the first bands to ever kind of put those two things together, metal and punk.
I have to be honest, when it came to the whole new wave of British heavy metal, I was really late to that. In fact, I think the first time I really heard about bands like Iron Maiden and Saxon and bands like that, I was just a Black Sabbath AC/DC Judas Priest person until I happened to produce this band called Dietrich. And I took a cassette down to this place called Oz Records in Woodland Hills and handed it over to a guy that was going to put it on their compilation, hopefully. We started talking about music and metal, and he asked me if I heard the new Iron Maiden album. And I said, well, I don't think I've ever heard of the band. And he gave me a LP of Number of the Beast, and that really got me into the whole new wave of British heavy metal. But like you said, for some reason, Motorhead was just before that. I worked at a record store called Music Plus out here in Los Angeles. I worked in the warehouse, and I do remember the first time, I think it was just a single that somebody from the warehouse had and stuck it on the LP for everybody to listen to. And I had never heard anything like that before. It's one of those things that you hear and you got to go and just put that needle back on, and especially since it's so short. It stands out. I mean, there was nothing like that I had heard before.
Yeah, that was the fun about working at the store, was anybody like you who would come in and say, hey, do you know who this Iron Maiden is? And people, if they're into metal, and a lot of people didn't. I mean, it's LA before the internet, before anything else. So, nobody knew who any of those bands were. So that was the most fun about working at the store, is turning bands like Maiden and all this other stuff on to people. So that was super fun. Talking about the production on this song, I listened to it today, actually, because I hadn't listened to it for a while. One thing that struck me for some reason is the cymbal sound. I just love the way the cymbals crash, and they kind of have like a big sound to them, and they're like, the frequency's kind of above everything else. So when he hits it, I know he hit those things hard, and you can kind of tell in the production. But I really love that. It kind of adds this extra element to the song.
Cymbals are always a hard thing to get right. A lot of people tend to bury them in the mix, but to me, it's the cymbals that make things exciting. But I got to be honest, when I think about the production of the song, the first thing that pops into my mind is the bass sound. The first time I heard it, I listened and I remember thinking, wow, this is the shittiest guitar sound that I've ever heard. And then you hear the roll and it all breaks in and you're like, wow, was that really the bass? I don't remember hearing anything like that before. And then, my God, when you hear Lemmy's voice, at first I thought maybe whatever effect is on that bass sound maybe is on this guy's vocal too, but I never heard anything like that before. If you like to gamble, I tell you I'm your man. You win some, lose some, and do the same to me. The pleasure is to blame. Ain't no difference what you say. I don't say green. The only card I need is the ace of spades. The ace of spades.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same way. When I heard that bass, I was with you. I was like, is that a guitar? What? That's a weird sounding guitar. And yeah, eventually it ended up being a bass. But that's kind of the magic of Motorhead, and the brilliance of Lemmy was he used the bass really as kind of a guitar in addition to the background with the bass. It was really interesting. And the way they wrote songs, the way he played it was almost like playing a guitar. I mean, Joey from Manowar kind of adopted a bit of the same thing, not shortly thereafter, if not, within months probably. But look, I was a big fan of Bon Scott from AC/DC, so I kind of like those kind of growly, edgy vocals. So Lemmy I just thought his vocals were like an edgier Bon Scott kind of.
Yeah, but I think the other thing that when people heard Lemmy sing, people that maybe couldn't carry a tune at all, they got it into their heads that, hey, maybe I can sing in this heavy metal stuff too. So if there is a negative, I don't know if that's a negative, but yeah, he had an incredible voice, and I think he influenced a hell of a lot of metal singers.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's hardly any metal bands that existed from 1982 or whatever up until today that aren't influenced by Motorhead or aren't fans of Motorhead. In fact, I don't really know anybody now. That I'm trying to think. don't think I know anybody that's a fan of metal that I know that doesn't like Motorhead. Like it's kind of universal where everybody loves Motorhead. And you would think there'd be a few people like, I didn't really get it, but on top of my head, I can't think of anybody.
Well, when we talk about Motorhead, we just say metal. You don't even need to put the word heavy in front of that. They are just metal. I mean, that is the best way to describe them. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, and this is the original lineup, which for me was obviously the best lineup. I mean, Filthy Animal Taylor, drummer, was just such a. They call him Animal because he really, literally was an animal. You watch him play, and the way he played and the style, it's just so intense, and it kind of had that sort of punk rock sort of vibe to it.
Yeah, and I don't think there was a lot of bands just even doing double bass in heavy metal back then. So I think he was one of the pioneers. And the other thing about him is he was a really, really cool dude. Thank God I got to work with him and actually uh, call him my friend towards the end there. But that's another thing about him. He was just one of the coolest people that I've ever met.
Yeah, I got to meet those guys briefly when they came to LA a couple of times, and yeah, super nice. Their crew, all their crew guys were super nice, and it's very nice English people. And I've had a few hangouts with Lemmy, but he was an interesting guy. He never. I always every time met him, I didn't know if he really knew who I was or anything, but he was
Yeah,
nice.
he knows so many people just by sitting at the friggin' rainbow. Everybody would come up
Right.
and talk to him, and he was polite and nice and funny to everybody.
Yeah, I did notice though that if I had a good-looking girl with me, that he was even more friendly.
Yeah, that sounds like Lemmy.
So the producer, and I can't, I don't know how to pronounce his name. So it's Vic Mayali, I think, but I'm probably butchering his name, and I couldn't find a enunciation for it anywhere. But he was interesting because he was kind of all over the place. He had done a bunch of rock and roll and some other things. He worked with Hawkwind, which was Lemmy's former band, which I'm sure is part of the reason why he ended up doing this. But I think that the production style in this is really brilliant because it's very basic, it's very simple. And Lemmy even stated that Vic was not like he wasn't the best guy at the sounds and the engineering and all that sort of part of it, but he was brilliant because he knew the songs. He knew rock and roll. He knew how to make rock and roll sound good. And if you listen to any of his other productions, it's all pretty much the same. It's just really letting the band or the artist kind of shine.
Yeah, the other thing that I've heard Lemmy say about him was he was pretty mellow guy. He was a diabetic, so he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, but he was the type of person that, even though he was very mellow, he definitely would tell them what to do, and they would listen to him. He didn't yell or anything, but they followed his lead when it came to every time that they worked with him.
100%. And, that's why I love this part of the podcast and talking about the production because it really is so important. Like you can make a great band not sound good or a song not sound that good, and it kind of ruins the whole thing. And on the other level, more importantly, you can really make a song and a band much better if you do it properly.
Exactly. And the stuff isn't easy, and I mean you could take the same band, same instruments, and put them with 10 different producers doing the same song. You'll get 10 different sounds. So it is pretty important who you pick to work with.
Yeah, well, I know that because a lot of times we'll have producers or engineers do test mixes for things, and it's always interesting to me how different the mixes are. Like you'll get a bunch of really good producers, and they'll test mix a song for you, and it's so dramatically different from each one, which I always found really interesting.
Like I said, everyone's got their own idea of what a good guitar sound is, what a good kick sound is. I just try to make sure that I'm doing what the band wants. It's hard to please everybody in a band also. That's the other thing. You start letting the entire band listen to a mix, and there's five guys in the band. You get a lot of, well, I can't hear my drums. Well, I can't hear my bass very well. So you do have to try to single out who is the spokesperson, maybe the person that wrote the song you should listen to. But yeah, it's not an easy job. It's hard to please everybody every time. That's for sure.
And especially heavy metal, and especially a band like Motorhead, where everything's kind of in this one sort of zone. Like the bass sounds like the guitar sounds like the bass. You've got all these big, heavy kick drums and toms and Lemmy's voice, and they all kind of occupy that same area of frequencies where you've got to work really hard to get all of those things to be able to sound clear. And the production on this record, well, really all the ones that he did with Motorhead, I mean, everything is clear. You can hear everything perfectly. Nothing's muddied up or drowned out. That's really hard to do.
Yeah, it's especially hard when the music is that fast. When it comes to speed metal, anything that is that quick, things don't have a lot of time to actually finish their sound, especially something like a double kick. You hit a kick drum once, and if there's space, you can really hear that kick. But when it's going, it's really hard to make some of the faster songs sound good. And that's a great example of putting all the pieces in the right places. Ace of Spades.
Yeah. Well, again, classic song, one of the most classic heavy metal songs of all time. At some point, there is a top 20 that I did, that's the only part of this thing we're going to count down. This one probably should have been in there, but it's not. So we're talking about it now. And I got to thank, again, my good friend, Mr. Metoyer, for coming on and talking about the production on Motorhead's great Ace of Spades. Appreciate it, sir. Thanks a lot. And stay safe out there.
I'm going to try. Good talking to you as always, Brian.
All right. Welcome back. We are going to continue our conversation about the great Motorhead song, Ace of Spades, with my good friend, comedian, actor, host of the SiriusXM Jim Florentine show on Boneyard, which is probably my favorite show on Boneyard to get mad at other DJs, and many other things. Jim, how are you?
It's good to see you, Brian. As always, man. I haven't seen you in a while in person.
So Motorhead. So I asked you, I wanted you to come on, obviously, or you gave me a bunch of bands that you were into. I said, "Oh, let's do Motorhead, let's do Ace of Spades." So, we've been talking about Motorhead and how important they are to the metal scene, and they were back then. Because when they were big, and they were obviously humongous in England, like we've said, was the late 70s when metal was kind of dead. But Motorhead was really one of the few bands that were really holding the flag up and making phenomenal music. Case in point, Ace of Spades.
They released Overkill and Bomber in the same year in 1979. 2 albums in the same year is crazy. 2 classics, too. There's not a bad song on either one of those records. And then they come back in 1980 with Ace of Spades. So what happened was I saw that Ozzy was coming around with Blizzard of Oz in America, and I saw that Motorhead was on some of the tour dates. So me and my older brother, who were in the metal, go, who's this band Motorhead? Let's go get their album because we want to, when we go see them, want to notice some of the songs. And I never forget going to like an import record store in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was living at the time. And I saw the cover of that Ace of Spades. And I thought they were like Mexicans. I'm like, it's weird. Mexicans playing heavy metal? You would never think that because of that cover. And we didn't know what they sounded like because it was 1980. So we had, you couldn't listen to it before. And it was an import. It was like $17.99 for the album. And we're like, we got to get it. But you know why? Because we had Saxon Wheels of Steel record. And on the back, 2 of them were wearing Motorhead shirts. So we go, if Saxon's wearing a Motorhead shirt, they got to be good. That's how we originally found out. And then we saw they were opening for Ozzy. And we brought that album home. We put it on. And it's still, to this day, I noticed 23 studio records by Motorhead. It's still my favorite. Pound for pound, I got to give this one, it's my favorite Motorhead record.
Yeah, they were really in their prime at this point. And again, I think one of the reasons why they're so important is because they also were the first metal band. And I don't even know, I think at that point, people weren't even really calling them metal necessarily, but they had such a punk influence. And it was like metal, but a different form of metal. And that obviously went on to spawn Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, and, all the other stuff that came after them. And that grungy edge to it. And I'm trying to remember, I know Lemmy's talked about his what he thought of punk, but I don't know that he was a huge fan of it, if I remember correctly.
I know he liked The Damned. And, look, it's Lemmy's favorite band. Well, well, Chuck Berry, big influence on him. And then also ZZ Top was one of his favorite bands.
Yeah, which is interesting because when you look at his influence, I mean, look, all of metal came from the blues. I mean, that's where everything came from, really. And starting with Black Sabbath, which was a blues band called Earth before they were Black Sabbath. What I could never really figure out with him, I mean, I never was able to hang out with him enough to really ask him, but how did all of those influences, where did this whole Motorhead thing come from? Because obviously he was in Hawkwind before this, which was kind of a spacey, almost Grateful Dead-ish sort of band. And then all of a sudden Motorhead comes out. It's this blistering, heavy rock and roll metal thing.
Yeah, I don't know. What's weird though about the Ace of Spades record? Like, you got the original edition. I'm sure you did. The album opened up with "Chase is Better Than the Catch," and that was the first single. I remember seeing a video. I remember on a Friday night videos, and Filthy Animals playing the drums like 3 feet away from me and my friend. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. Ace of Spades was the side 2, track 1. And then they switched it later on.
We talk a lot about it, the show, about historical stuff and how sequencing back in the day was so important. And a lot of people feel, and I was one of them too, that song, the first song on side 2 was a really important song, and almost more important than the song on side 1. Look at Number of the Beast, where Number of the Beast is the lead song on side 2. People, of course, these days don't know about that because they don't listen to it that way. But it is interesting. And it's also another thing that we've talked about on the show before too, is that bands and or labels or whoever managers when working with them sometimes don't realize what they have in terms of songs. Like they went with, like you said, Chase is Better Than the Catch, which is a great song. But I mean, come on. I mean, Ace of Spades is iconic. Motorhead. How that wasn't the first single, I have no idea.
If you were in charge of that sequence, what would you have put first? The first song to open the album?
I mean, there's a debate where I could see where they're coming from for Ace of Spades being the first song on the side 2, but I would have absolutely put it as the first song on the record. That's by far the best. I mean, the record's amazing, but that's the best song on the record. And you should always start. I say that my favorite album of all time is Number of the Beast, and they didn't start with the best song there either. So, but yeah, I would have put Ace of Spades.
So you would have, that would have been your first track opening the record.
100%.
So what track would have been side 2 for, first song? Because you said that's real important.
I think that's why they went with the way they did, because it really isn't, aside from Ace of Spades, there really isn't a song on there that's like an opener for a side. So maybe that's why they did. I mean, Chase would have been fine on side 2 as well, but yeah, it's a tricky thing, sequencing, and it's like I said, so important back then, and now it's still important, I think, the way people listen to records, but now it's more, you put your best songs, the first 2 or 3, and then you kind of sprinkle stuff throughout.
When they switched it though, they put Chase Better Than Catch, the last song after the hammer, which was weird. They stuck it all the way in the back. The Road Crew could have been a song that could have been a classic. There's a lot of them on there. Shoot You in the Back could have been one.
Especially those early classic albums. I don't ever get bored of listening to that stuff. Like if it comes on the radio or wherever, I'm always into it. I like it when they go kind of deep. And you do that a lot on your show where you'll play stuff that isn't normally on Boneyard, and it's always really cool stuff. But like Limb for Limb, for example, came up a few months ago and I don't remember if it was your show but it was on Boneyard. I'm like, oh man, I forgot how good this song is.
Yeah, no, I played that. What happens on the Boneyard is I'll put a song into the system, and then all of a sudden they'll start playing it in regular rotation.
So when you first heard Motorhead, obviously you're talking about going to the record store and buying the record. So what were your initial impressions of it back when you first got it?
I couldn't believe it because it didn't sound like anything I heard before. When I got the record, me and my brother started listening to it, and Motorhead's first show in America was in Miami, some stadium in Miami, and me and my brother went. It was UFO, Heart, Motorhead, and like 2 other bands. I can't remember what they were. And Motorhead went on at like noon. It was like a whole day concert, and me and my brother and they played 25 minutes. And we said we found out they were going on first, the lineup, so we got there early, and we sat in the sun just to see Motorhead, and nobody knew who they were. Nobody had any clue. 25 minutes of just this noise. It was beautiful. We loved it. And then after like the 3rd band, after UFO, like, all right, let's get out of here. We're good. But I remember I saw that first show in the United States, April of 1981.
This is where living in South Florida came in handy finally.
It was great, yeah. And then, they picked up the tour with Ozzy. But I don't know, for some reason, I think, when you get that record, the masterpiece, Ace of Spades, is the first one I heard. How can you not be a fan of the band? Like if I start off with On Parole, the first one, I wasn't crazy about that record. The production on it and the songs are just okay. I might not have been a huge fan, but that's the first thing that turned me on was that record, Ace of Spades.
They were such a unique band at the time because I remember I was just getting into the new wave of British heavy metal in like '79 when I first one of my trading friends sent me the Iron Maiden Soundhouse tape. So I started getting into it then, and so I was getting a lot of Sounds magazines and NME and all the English magazines. So I would see the name Motorhead, and I think that's where I first heard about them. Their albums were like #1 on the charts. I was, what is this band Motorhead? So finally I can't remember which record it was. It might have been Bomber, but I was like, wow, this is really intense. Like I haven't heard anything this heavy before.
Oh, so you heard them before Ace of Spades came out?
It was definitely '79. It was one of those two. I think it was Bomber, but like I said, I was discovering the scene that was happening in England, and Motorhead was kind of predated that whole thing. They weren't really part of that new wave of British heavy metal necessarily, but they were obviously a massive influence on all those bands.
Speaking of #1 albums, you would think Ace of Spades would go to #1 in England. The album that went to #1 was No Sleep to Hammersmith. The live album after that, Ace of Spades never went to #1. That was their first #1 record.
Yeah, I remember they were really high on the chart, so it might have been top 5 or something. But I was kind of like, who is this band?
And it was weird that a live album after Ace of Spades would be the #1 record that they would get, not Ace of Spades or Bomb or Overkill.
So the thing that I always harp back on, and I'm older, so there are some records and bands that stand the test of time that, you can listen to it today and it still sounds as good as it did when you first heard it, when it first came out. And some bands don't. Like there's a lot of bands that I loved back in the late '70s, early '80s that I listen to now. I still like it, but it's not like, but Motorhead to me, it still sounds fresh and new and the energy is there. So especially the earlier stuff, obviously, was so great.
You could put on any record at any time. It doesn't sound dated with Motorhead. And like you said, that does happen with a lot of bands. And, the whole history, 23 studio records. I love turning new people on the Motorhead. Like younger people, like I know Ace of Spades. I go, no, go check out, Orgasmatron. Go check out Iron. I love Iron Fist. I know Lemmy didn't like that record. I love that record.
Yeah, I found that their later records, as much as I love them, they all of them had like 1 to 3 phenomenal songs on there. And some of the other stuff might have not been as good. And I do like Iron Fist a lot. I think that's one of their stronger albums of their kind of second part or whatever you want to call it of their career. But they were always good. And they were always so much fun live, even after they made the changes in the lineup. Mickey D came in, who's a incredible drummer, and Phil Campbell, and they were always good. It was always about Lemmy. Motorhead is Lemmy, so it's always about him.
There was a track called Dirty Love that was a bonus track on Ace of Spades. Lemmy and Fast Eddie Clarke wanted that on the album, and Lemmy didn't. There was a big fight over it. So it didn't make the record. I forget what song Fast Eddie wanted off the album and put that on. Lemmy said no, and Fast Eddie was really pissed. And that's a great song. That could have easily fit on the record, but I guess because they had like 12 songs, they don't want to put a 13, but that easily could have fit.
Yeah, I love that song. It's great.
But Lemmy didn't like it. I guess Fast Eddie helped write it, whatever, and he didn't want it on. It was a big fight over it.
Well, that's another thing about Motorhead. They were always fighting, sometimes fist fighting. And I think that kind of, kinetic, violent energy in there helped create and fuel a lot of these amazing songs.
Fast Eddie leaves in the middle of the Iron Fist tour because he did a song with Wendy O. Williams and he was mad. Yeah, Stand By Your Man he did. And then Brian Robertson comes into the band. The first, I wasn't a big Thin Lizzy fan. I know you're a huge Thin Lizzy fan. So when Another Perfect Day comes out, they're playing this club in Jersey, and I didn't know who Brian Robertson was. I wasn't in the Thin Lizzy world, and he came out with like shorts and a friggin' bandana on or something, or a headband. He looked like the singer in Loverboy. I'm like, what is this? He had these short shorts on and sitting next to Lemmy and Filthy.
Oh my God.
But he was amazing on guitar. He only lasted the one record.
Yeah, I kind of almost forgot he was in the band for a minute too. Yeah, and don't ever just say those words again that you don't like Thin Lizzy. That's just
no. I didn't. I wasn't into him at that point.
Oh, okay.
Thin Lizzy is this one band that I just keep discovering gems every day. There's another one that pops up and another. It's unbelievable, that band.
Well, they've grown. We talked about bands their music's not aging, and Thin Lizzy's another band where I'm I mean, I've always been a fan of theirs, but over time, I've become a much bigger fan. Where I think, now they're probably maybe my third or fourth favorite band. And Motorhead is kind of the same way. Where I've always really liked Motorhead and had a great respect for what they did, but they were also kind of coming out when new wave British heavy metal thing was happening. I was so into that. I didn't discount Motorhead. I love them. I thought they were great, but they weren't like in my favorite band categories. But as time has gone on, I'm like, they kind of are that way, especially when I go back and listen to this stuff.
Then MTV came along and Motorhead stuff was a little too heavy and they were ugly.
Yeah.
And if you were ugly and you were in heavy metal, you weren't going to get that much airplay on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of criminal what happened in terms of that. And then they kind of, like a lot of bands were chasing singles and stuff that, whether either their label or their management were trying to get them to do it. It's like, Motorhead's not really a singles sort of band. There were a lot of great songs and they had a lot of stuff played on the radio, but the classic stuff is all that early stuff. And again, I don't think that you can discount how amazing a big influence they are for literally everybody that came after them.
Motorhead had some down years for a while, like in the 90s and stuff, and then they came back and just started getting bigger and bigger every year. Like Lemmy used to have to put all the money he made on the tour back into producing a record. He was always just barely getting by until they started really catching on, like, I don't know, early like 2000s when they started picking up steam again. The press started liking them. That's what happened too. And then the other musicians started talking about, besides Metallica was always, talking about Motorhead, but then the press started liking them too.
And that's one of, it's interesting because the big floor of thrash, Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, and Megadeth, all of those artists have a lot of different favorite bands, and a lot of them aren't really the same, which I find interesting, except Motorhead is the one constant that all four of those bands cite as a massive influence.
I just remember as a kid reading Sounds magazine or Kerrang! Was in and said, there was an article on Motorhead that said, Lemmy goes, if you live next door to Motorhead, your lawn's going to die. And I thought that was the greatest quote ever. If you live next door to Motorhead, your lawn's going to die.
He was a great one-liner, a great lyricist and stuff too, obviously, a lot of those songs. And I always like stuff where there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, and a lot of his stuff was very tongue-in-cheek lyrically.
I love Don't Need Religion on Iron Fist is great. I mean, it's just so many good songs. But Ace of Spades, I mean, Pound for Fast and Loose. There's so many. Fire, Jailbait, The Hammer, Bite the Bullet. There's every song, just one after another, just punches you in the face, that record.
That 3-record spread they had before the live album was kind of there's not a bad song on any of those at all. And then, they put it into the live record, which was at the time, their biggest record. But that's kind of what was happening back then, is the live records were always the big records. You go all the way back to Kiss Alive and Frampton Comes Alive and all that stuff.
I like No Sleep to Hammer, but it didn't sound different from the studio versions that much. Like, I wasn't that crazy about it, unlike live albums from the 70s, which sounded way better than the studio records, I thought.
Part of it is that Motorhead had a great sound, and even in the studio, the production was interesting. We just talking about them before we had you on in here. It's an interesting production because it's Motorhead. They have their own sound, and capturing that sound is basically just, okay, this is what they sound like as a band, and they captured it in the studio though. So I think that's why the live album wasn't really different, because that's pretty much how they sounded normally in the studio, live, everywhere.
Yeah. It's really just a shame, man, that they're not around anymore, because it was always, and going to see Motorhead for years, like every year and a half, they come back around again, and you go, oh, Motorhead's all right, going to the show. And it was always great. We are Motorhead, and we play rock and roll, and the loudest shows ever. I mean, I've been to a million shows. Some days my ears are ringing for like 3 or 4 days after a Motorhead show.
Do you wear earplugs?
I didn't for a while because I was a rebel. I was almost like a condom. I'm like, no, I'm going bareback. I think I finally started at the last 3 Motorhead shows. I have to. I have no choice because this is unbearable. I mean, they would crank it up. I've never been to a louder show ever in my life.
Yeah, I went to, starting in 78 is when I really started to go to a lot of shows. All the way up until 1996, I never wore earplugs until my ears. I think it was one of the Kiss reunion shows, the end of the show. My one ear, all I heard was, I go, maybe I should start wearing earplugs. And the tinnitus I have today is from all that, but that's okay.
I know you think like you're younger, you can't tell, hey, wear earplugs. I know my hearing's pretty, okay, but it's definitely taken a beating over these concerts over the years. But I've been wearing them for like the last 5 years, earplugs.
So I'm so used to them now. But talk about how they're not around anymore, which is obviously very sad. But those guys lived crazy hard lives. I mean, No Sleep Till Hammersmith was literally before the tour. It was like a 3-week tour. They said, okay, nobody's going to sleep. I think it's in Lemmy's book, but it was I think Lemmy and maybe one other guy, one of the crew guys or something, made it through the entire tour without sleeping. They were doing speed, which is amazing that they're doing all that and not sleeping and still sounding incredible. But yeah, those guys lived tough lives. And of course, Lemmy, I don't know if he was ever sober that I'm aware of, but I'm sure he was at some point.
Well, I know that when he got diabetes later on in his life, he was drinking Jack and Cokes. Were always a Jack and Cokes. He switched to clear liquor because somehow some doctor told him if you have. So then he started drinking vodka.
Yeah, well, vodka is the healthiest of all the alcoholic drinks, if there is such a thing. But quick, funny Lemmy story. CMJ, College Music Journal, which is a publication back in the 80s and 90s, all the college radio stations, they used to have a huge gathering or something, convention, I guess, in New York every year, and they'd have panels and stuff. And so I hosted a panel once. I had Bruce Dickinson on, and he was doing a solo career. He was actually got into you're supposed to meet in the pre-room beforehand to just talk about what you're going to talk about. And Bruce got there before I did, which was kind of crazy. I'm like, what are you doing here so early? He's like, I want to learn. But Lemmy was on the panel as well. And Lemmy showed up about 3 minutes before we were going to go out and do the panel and had a gigantic Slurpee cup of Jack and Coke. And this is 1:00 in the afternoon, probably, but he was amazing. Like you'd throw a question to him and he was phenomenal, but always seemed to be drunk. At least when I saw him.
Well, I remember I was on a college radio station and Motorhead was playing at a local club near my house. So I went there during the day. I knew where they parked the tour buses in the round back, and I knocked on the window. I guess the tour manager came out. I go, listen, I'm a radio station. I'd love to interview Lemmy if I could. And the guy's like, all right, listen, man, he's sleeping. It was like 1 PM. He goes, come back at 5:00 with a bottle of Jack Daniels and you could sit with them. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, just make sure you bring a bottle of Jack. So I bought a bottle of Jack. I interviewed him for like an hour. He's like, you staying for the show? Yeah, all right, good. You're hooked up, all right. Like, then I hung out with him backstage after. It was awesome. So I just had to bring him a bottle of Jack. It was the second interview I ever did.
That's amazing.
And he sat with me for an hour. It was great.
It's funny. I wasn't at all close with Lemmy. I met him a few times and stuff, but I noticed that if in any time I was with a cute girl for whatever reason, he was very interested in talking to me and what was and more importantly talking to the girl. So, but that was Lemmy.
Jim Norton did this show Down and Dirty with Jim Norton on HBO. So he hosted a bunch of comics, and Lemmy was the house DJ on the show. Because Jim Norton was a big Lemmy fan. So Lemmy was just up top, and Jim would go back and forth with Lemmy, and then they'd bring up the comics. So I was on the show. So we're going back to New York City after the taping of the show. It was me, Jim Norton, and Lemmy in the limo in New York City. He had to film something like some intro thing in the city or whatever. So Jim goes, I got to leave. So it's just me and Lemmy in the limo. My car's in Jersey. I didn't care. I'm like, whatever, I'll figure out how to get home. And I tell the guy, all right, just drop me off at Penn Station. I'm going to take the train. And Lemmy's like, you don't want to go to a strip club with me? I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right, if you don't want to go. I go, no, yeah. He goes, if you got to go home. No, I go, no, I don't have to go home. Hung with a strip club till like 6 a.m. And 2 different strippers come up to me and they go, is that Lemmy from Motorhead? I go, yeah. He goes, he slept over my house one time or my apartment. 2 different ones. That's great.
Yeah, not only is Motorhead and Lemmy legendary in the musical world, but just in the world of personalities, he was one of a kind. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Did he remember you from the interview you did with him way back when?
No, but he remembered me from that metal show because he was on about 2 or 3 times, and he knew Don Jameson too. Because one time we were filming that metal show, and Lemmy, we'd always put him on the second show because he was a little cranky if he didn't have his booze in him. Those British guys are cranky. They don't wake up till like 5 PM. They're miserable before then. So we knew to put him on a late show. So he taped it. It was great. And he was sitting in his green room, and we just walking by. We're done for the night, and we're like, we're not going to bother the guy. And then the door was open a little bit. He goes, Don, Jim, come on, you guys want to have a drink with me? We're like, yeah. We sat with him for like 2 hours and drank with him.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, he was definitely legendary dude. Lived a hard life, but I mean, look, the fact that he lived that life and made it to 71, I think that's a pretty good run for that.
Absolutely. I remember bringing my 14-year-old nephew to meet him. And Lemmy was really nice. He signed all the stuff for him. And I go, Lemmy, I go, his name is Mike. I go, Mike, you should do a drink, but have your first drink with Lemmy. And Lemmy said no. And I'm like, come on, how great would that be? His first drink. He goes, he's 14. No, don't start. Don't do it. I'm not having a drink with him. He wouldn't do it.
Well, that's nice. At least he had a conscience.
He did. Good. He did have a conscience. Yeah. But such a good guy, man. It's such a legend. And yeah, I'm surprised that he lasted till 70, 71, the way he lived his life.
I don't want to keep it any longer. I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much. It's been a blast as always. And we'll get you on again at some point during the course of this thing.
Yeah, get me, some Accept, some Ozzy, Rose. If you're going to do Rose Tattoo, I don't know if a Rose Tattoo song will hit the top 100, but
you never know. They're in the conversation, but I don't know if this thing does well and I have to do more, then maybe we'll get to that. I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate it, Brian. You have me on. It's an
Thanks
honor.
a lot, man. Appreciate it. I also forgot to mention author Jim Florentine as well. So amongst the many things he does. So again, thanks a lot. You can go to, is it jimflorentine.com? Is that your official site? Yeah,
jimflorentine.com for all my new comedy special, You Can't Please Them All, is on Amazon Prime.
Huge thank you to everybody involved in this one. Martin Popoff, as always, Bill Metoyer, and my good friend, Mr. Jim Florentine. Fun talking about one of the greatest metal songs of all time. As always, thanks to Lizzie Borden for our theme song and the man who makes it all happen, producer Christian Blatt. I'll see you guys next episode.
100 songs at the fire.